at the meeting that they had where the reversal happened, she was taken totally unawares too. They hadn't told her.
Right.
And I don't, my observance is that at most selectmen's meetings, she chooses not to pick a battle. Right.
We are on air.
We're on.
Yeah,
Okay.
so,
So, I think what we'll do is welcome the television audience to a public hearing which we opened about 5 minutes ago and put on hold. And my name is John Weiss. I'm the chair of the committee, and
Linda McCamick.
Martha Taylor, Town Planner.
George Morse, Associate Member.
And David Powell.
And so what we're going to do then is we are going to reopen, no, is that where we are?
Yeah, I think we-
Reopen the public hearing, which I'm doing right now. And we will go through presentations that we have for 3 issues. The first is a revision to our site plan review procedures. The second is a new aspect of the zoning bylaw which deals exclusively with medical marijuana. And then the third is the flood hazard overlay district, which is necessary in order to have residents of the town ensure that they can get flood insurance. So what we're going to do is go through this right now and go to the site plan review procedures. And before we get into this, some background. Our town attorney, after we made changes to our zoning bylaw in the last 2 town meetings, had discussions with staff and members of the board regarding a number of things relative to the fact that he and she believed that the site plan review procedures that we had were not exactly up to date. And so over the course of about a 4 or 5 month period, a subcommittee of our town planner, Linda McCamick, who's to my right, and Kathleen Pearson, who is the vice chair of the board, reviewed several ordinances and site plan review documents for the state of Massachusetts, and also in particular we were interested in looking at what procedures existed in places like Newburyport and West Newbury and Rowley and Ipswich and Georgetown to see what they did. So what we are recommending here is a summary of the kinds of things that we saw that we thought were appropriate for Newbury and would make this ordinance better. So just as a review, the site plan review bylaw was adopted at our May 2006 annual town meeting, and it was later amended in October of that same year. And again, the purpose is to provide a process for review of plans submitted to the planning board for which there are uses and structures which may have impacts on traffic, utilities, environmental and water resources, drainage, and the character of the community. And so we're looking to make some changes to that. And so in the first of, you look at the code, it says, well, applicability. And right now, we have kind of broad language that kind of says any non-residential or non-agricultural construction project. And we want to change that to any proposal for commercial, industrial, institutional, educational, municipal, as a further refinement of what those uses would be instead of just any, and then add to it multifamily or mixed-use project. Because when the site plan ordinance was approved in '06, we didn't allow multifamily uses in the town, but since then we have permitted them in the Upper Green village area and in the Byfield village area. And so, for example, what that might pertain to is the Woodbridge School, which is just 200 feet to our left here at Town Hall, was a historical school that the town put out to bid, and a developer came in and is putting 4 units on that property. We don't have many projects like that in the town, and so this would be one of those projects that would be susceptible to that. The second change, which is, we think, a rather major one, is that we're separating this into 2 levels. The first level, which is we're calling minor projects, which is meaning any project between 1,000 and 1,999 square feet, right? Which is a small project. And then a second level, which is what we're calling level 2, for larger, more complex projects, which could mainly be for anything larger than 2,000 square feet and up. And so you have really clearly two levels, one a relatively small project, one a relatively large project. And as part of that, and as subsets, for that level 1 project, we're going to eliminate any public hearing requirement for the level 1, because we think that they can be handled by staff and by the board in a more simple way. And what that does is allow us to do the second thing, which is streamline the time allowed for final approvals. And so, for example, the current timeline for approval, in the way our ordinance is written today, says that formal application is submitted to the planning board, then a public hearing must open, not close, but open within 65 days, and it can go beyond that. A decision must be filed with the town clerk within 90 days after the public hearing closes. So in the best of circumstances, that's right after the public hearing, 65 days. So the earliest it could be is 155 days, 65 plus 90. And then in addition, there's a 30-day appeal period after the decision. So that's almost a half a year of time in order to get a site plan approval. And in some cases, it can go further, because sometimes the public hearings are carried forward for a month, perhaps 2 months. So what we're proposing is for the level 1 application, that the formal application is again submitted to the planning board. The application is reviewed by the board, and at a regular scheduled meeting within 35 days of submission, and that the final action by the board is within 60 days. So, and then instead of a 30-day appeal period, there's a 20-day appeal period. So it's 95 days, and that's probably close to maximum, as opposed to a minimum of 155 days, which we think is doable. The second area is in these level 2 projects, where the formal application again is made to the planning board. Public hearing opens within 35 days instead of 65 days, so there's 1 month. A decision must be filed with the town clerk within 25 days after the public hearing closes instead of 90 days, which is 2 months, so there's a total of 3 months savings, and then a 20-day appeal period instead of 30. So it's almost a 3.5 month period of time that we think that we can reduce the amount of time necessary to review a site plan. Other revisions that are to be made are decision criteria and conditions of approval are clarified and expanded. For example, we've added requirements for stormwater management, which have become a major issue for the town, and for adequate access for fire, safety, and emergency equipment. And that we also added provisions for inspections during construction and for enforcement of violations of the conditions of approval. I want to expand on that aspect just for a second, if I could. We've had a project that we approved about almost 2 years ago that really has carried on much longer than should have. And we really didn't have teeth in there that allowed the planning board to go in there and require action without without, well, we just didn't have the authority. So we'd like to have that authority, and we think that will help ensuring that people do the work that they say that they're going to do. There's another aspect of this, and that is right now the planning board can require a bond of any project in a site plan review for any aspect of the work, including the building. And we're actually think that that's wrong. We think that the building shouldn't be part of the bonding. And so we're recommending that, and this is not written on what you're seeing on television, that it should just simply be for the site plan work that's being done. And so it'll reduce the amount of work that a person would have to bond. So that summarizes what we're planning to do on site plan review. Would you have any questions on that, Eric, or else we'll go into medical marijuana?
Can you please identify yourself and give your name and address?
Eric Swan, 14 Old Farm Way. So, just a question on how the 2,000 square feet was arrived at?
Well, yeah, we looked at 6 or 7 other communities, and they were all at about 2,000 square feet. And so we said that must be, looks like it's the right thing. And they were similar to us. There are some, Georgetown has 500 square feet, or 800, what was I?
I think it's 500.
We thought that was way too small. And so we just looked for a happy medium of what we thought made sense.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah, seems reasonable. So with that, we're going to move to the issue of medical marijuana. And George Morse, myself, and Martha will share the presentation on this. George?
Do you begin it?
No, you
Oh,
don't.
okay, because I don't have that, please. Okay, David. The background of the need for a bylaw for registered marijuana dispensaries is the Citizens Initiative permitting cultivation, distribution, possession, and use of marijuana for medical purposes was approved by 63% of Massachusetts voters at the November 6, 2012 election. In Essex County, 61.5% of the voters and 69% of Newbury voters who cast votes on the question approved the law. The result was Chapter 369, an act for the humanitarian medical use of marijuana, went into effect on January 1st, 2013. Okay, David? Following approval of the act, the State Department of Public Health promulgated regulations which went into effect on May 24, 2013, and the regulations provided guidance
I feel
to,
like
yeah, I know it, sometimes I do, provided guidance to nonprofit entities seeking to qualify as registered marijuana dispensaries, RMD, also known as medical marijuana treatment centers, and to cities and towns in regulating medical marijuana. The definition of a registered marijuana dispensary, also known as a medical marijuana treatment center, or RMD, is that it is a not-for-profit entity registered under 105 Code of Massachusetts Regulations 725.100, to be known as a registered marijuana dispensary, RMD, that acquires, cultivates, possesses, processes, including development of related products such as edible marijuana, infused products, tinctures, aerosols, oils, or ointments, and also has authority to transfer, transport, sell, distribute, and dispense or administer marijuana products containing marijuana-related supplies or educational materials to registered qualifying patients or their personal caregivers. Unless otherwise specified, RMD refers to the site or sites of dispensing, cultivation, and preparation of marijuana. Who can obtain medical marijuana? A qualifying patient is a Massachusetts resident 18 years of age or older who has been diagnosed by a Massachusetts licensed certifying physician as having a debilitating medical condition or a Massachusetts resident under 18 years of age who has been diagnosed by 2 Massachusetts licensed certifying physicians as having a debilitating medical condition that is also a life-limiting illness subject to the regulations. A qualifying patient must have a bona fide physician-patient relationship with a certifying physician. A qualifying patient must receive a registration card from the Department of Public Health. Who can obtain marijuana? Continuing on with that, the personal caregiver of a qualifying patient is a person who is at least 21 years old, who has agreed to assist with the registered qualifying patient's medical use of marijuana, and is not the registered qualifying patient's certifying physician. A personal caregiver may be an employee of a hospice, provider, nursing home or medical facility, or visiting nurse, personal care attendant, or home health aide providing care to a qualifying patient. The personal caregiver must receive a registration card from the Department of Public Health. Okay, David? Oh. A debilitating medical condition is cancer, glaucoma, positive status for human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS, hepatitis C, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, Crohn's disease, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis, MS, when such diseases are debilitating and other debilitating conditions as determined in writing by a qualifying patient's certifying physician. An RMD is a center to cultivate, process, and dispense marijuana, and may do so by providing a 60-day supply, up to 10 ounces, either direct on-sale site or on-site sale, or home delivery to a registered qualifying patient. All RMDs, qualifying patients, personal caregivers, and certifying physicians must be registered with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. An RMD may not have more than 2 locations in Massachusetts at which marijuana is cultivated. Marijuana-infused products are prepared and marijuana is dispensed. Each of these activities may occur at only one such location, which may be either the RMD's principal place of business or one department-approved alternate location, but not at both. There are, oop, you want to go ahead, John? Go right ahead. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Eric, do you have any questions on that first portion?
No,
No. Okay.
thank you.
So, during the initial rollout of this program in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, up to 35 registered marijuana dispensaries will be allowed statewide, and up to 5, at least 1, to be allowed per county. So, decision was made in late January of this year, 2014, and here are the numbers for the counties so far. 2 in Barnstable, 2 in Bristol, 2 in Essex. We'll get into that later. Hampton is 1, Hampshire 1, Suffolk 2, and the only one that has more than 2 is really Middlesex County, which goes out into the western suburbs. The 2 in Essex County, 1 in Salem, Alternative Therapies Group, and in Haverhill, Healthy Farms, Inc. And then, in addition, 2 cultivation facilities have been proposed for Amesbury. 1 for Alternative Therapies Group, the Salem Group, and 1 for Green Heart Holistic Health and Pharmaceuticals, a Boston Group. But no dispensing would be allowed in the Amesbury facilities. As part of our work, looking at this, the planning board made a trip to Portland in December?
Yes.
December or January. It was cold.
Raining.
And it was Linda, Martha, George, and myself, and we wanted to visit one of these facilities. And so what we found was a well-designed entryway, kind of off the side of a main building. And then when you got inside, a pretty secure environment where they would require buzzing to get in, and then once you're there, you had to leave your driver's license. This photo here is of our team, plus the local city councilor from Portland, who was the champion of medical marijuana for the city of Portland. And then we walked in, and what we discovered was that this patient waiting area looked like a cross between a doctor's office and, believe it or not, maybe even a spa. So we were pleasantly surprised at the quality of the tenant improvements, pleasantly surprised at the manner in which people were coming in to get their marijuana from the facility. When we were there, 21 to 25 people came in. Almost all of them were over the age of 55. And there were no incidents. And in fact, in the 2 years that they've been open, they have had no police or security issues.
Whoops.
How many of those people had the ailments? How many were caregivers or people coming to get?
As far as we knew, they were all people who were coming, who were not caregivers. These were people who were getting their facility.
Caregivers actually grow it
Yeah.
for the patients.
And they'll do it off-site.
Yeah.
So it would seem that the site setup, that parking and access to the front door and space inside the building should be appropriately laid out
Right.
for patients as opposed to more able-bodied people that are coming to do the
Yeah.
other transactions.
Yeah, I would say so. It seemed to work. It seemed to work. We didn't visit their other facilities, but this seemed to work. Martha,
Oh, is it,
I think you picked up.
is it my turn now?
I think so. We'll have to work on it.
Yes.
So under the Department of Public Health regulations, there are certain provisions which really kind of shape what these things can look like. So there can be no use of words such as marijuana, cannabis, or colloquial references to marijuana. You can't have Mary Jane's pot shop or anything like that. No images of marijuana-related paraphernalia on the exterior of the dispensary. No information about the products or the pricing of the products on the signage. You can't have any products visible from outside the RMD, and you can't consume marijuana on premises except for demonstration education if they are demonstrating to the patient how to, use some of the things that they need to use. There are some things which we learned fairly early on through test cases. I think it was Burlington and Wakefield both tried to ban RMDs outright, and the Attorney General ruled that couldn't be done. You can regulate land and structures that are used for RMDs as long as the regulations don't conflict with state law or DPH regulations, and that's been a consistent theme throughout all the rulings that the Attorney General has been making on the bylaws that have been proposed, and we've looked at a good number of them. Municipalities are allowed to establish a temporary moratorium of reasonable length, which the Attorney General determined at the end of last year, or late last year, could be up until December 31st of this year, to provide time for communities to develop zoning and other regulations to address the land use, public health, public safety issues related to the use of medical marijuana. And as I said, we did pass a moratorium in special town meeting in October through December 31st, 2014. So if the proposed bylaw goes through, then the temporary moratorium would end. As I said, we've been looking at Attorney General rulings on the bylaws and also the moratorium language that have been passed. And as I said before, nothing can be adopted that conflicts with Mass General Law or the DPH regulations. A special permit cannot be required for hardship cultivation, and I'll explain what that is in a moment. Hardship cultivation can't be limited to a specific area of town, particularly if that area is non-residential. And off-site delivery of marijuana by registered marijuana dispensaries can't be prohibited. As George mentioned before, you can either have on-site sales or home delivery. The Attorney General's also determined that the minimum distance, the DPH regulations set a default distance of 500 feet from the marijuana dispensary to certain protected uses, and that can't be applied to hardship cultivation. You can't deny a special permit for an RMD on the basis of federal law, because we know that federally it's still not a legal use. Municipality can't interpret a zoning bylaw's prohibition against off-site signage to include an RMD website. And if the RMD qualifies as a commercial agricultural use under the Mass General Law, the municipality can't require a special permit for it. So I'll discuss that a little bit more in a second as well. So there are two exemptions to zoning. One is the hardship cultivation, which I mentioned, and a qualifying patient can receive permission to grow their own if a bona fide hardship can be proven. And that would be a verified financial hardship, an actual physical incapacity to access reasonable transportation, either by the patient, him or herself, or a personal caregiver, or the lack of an RMD that will deliver marijuana to the patient or the personal caregiver's primary address, and also lack of an RMD within a reasonable distance of the patient's residence. Commercial agriculture, Mass General Law limits the ability of municipalities to regulate commercial agriculture and explicitly bans special permit requirements for commercial agricultural use. Property owner, in order to qualify for agricultural use exemption, has to demonstrate that the primary use of the property is commercial agriculture and any other use is accessory. And in areas where agriculture is not allowed by right, agricultural activities may be limited to parcels of 5 acres or more, or parcels of 2 acres or more if at least $1,000 is generated from the agricultural use annually based on gross sales. So in trying to put together our bylaw, what we were attempting to do is to provide a permitting process for the placement of RMDs within Newbury and to minimize the adverse impacts of RMDs on adjacent properties, residential neighborhoods, historic districts, schools, playgrounds, other locations where minors congregate by regulating the siting, design, and the placement of the RMDs. In putting this together, there were a number of considerations that we talked about. Some of these came from our meeting with the people up at the Wellness Connection in Maine. Some of them came from various things that we were reading. The first was whether the RMD should be allowed in specific zoning districts or if we should create an overlay zoning district for it. Some communities like Cambridge was creating an overlay district which would it was kind of a patchwork of different locations within the city. If we did specific districts, which ones would be most appropriate? If we did an overlay district, again, where should that be? What would be the appropriate distance from schools, daycare facilities, et cetera? As I mentioned, 500 feet is the default per the DPH regulations, but they allow more or less. But under the Federal Controlled Substances Act, that requires 1,000 feet from protected uses for, I think, either manufacturing or sales of any Class 1 controlled substances. And when we met with the Wellness Connection people in Maine, they advised strongly that we do the 1,000 feet for basically the protection of the RMD. Another question was how the distance should be measured, whether it would be from building to building or facility to facility or property line to property line or some other sort of distance measurement, and what would be the appropriate permitting process, whether it should be a special permit, except for the agricultural exemption and hardship cultivation, site plan review, or other. There's some communities who are allowing it as of right in certain districts. Others, most seem to be going the special permit route. If it is special permit, who should the permit granting authority be, and what would be the appropriate special permit criteria for actually issuing the permit? So the bylaw that we've put together, the proposed revisions, provisions, allow RMDs by special permit of the planning board in the business and light industrial district, which is along Route 1, and 2 out of 3 areas of the commercial highway district in town. One is on the north side of Scotland Road, sort of the northeast corner of the interchange with I-95, and also on Central Street at the northeast interchange with I-95. We decided that the RMD, the distances should be measured property line to property line, because if you do it facility to facility, if one of the facilities expands, you might automatically be in violation of that distance. And in line with the federal requirements, we set it 1,000 feet from elementary, vocational, or secondary schools, colleges or universities, playgrounds, or public housing facilities. 500 feet, the default, from youth centers, childcare facilities, library, public park, or similar facilities where minors commonly congregate, and 100 feet from residential property. So just to, this is the business and light industrial area, and these are the 2 commercial highway areas where we're proposing that RMDs be allowed by special permit. And some of the special permit criteria and conditions, the applicant has to be registered with the state DPH and meet all the DPH requirements. The proposed location has to be in accordance with our distance requirements and sufficiently buffered so that abutting properties won't be adversely impacted. The site has to be designed to provide convenient, safe, and secure access and egress for clients and employees. So that means, Eric, not only what you were referring to in terms of getting into the building, but also egress and access from the site. Loading, refuse, and services have to be designed to be secure and shielded from abutters and from the street. And that was one of the things that the people at the Wellness Connection mentioned. They hadn't had any issues within their facilities, but they did have issues with people trying to go through the trash and things like that. So that's something that does need to be secure. Aesthetically, the building and site should be designed to be compatible with other buildings in the area, and the permit is valid only for the applicant and will become invalid if the permit holder ceases operating the dispensary.
Whoops.
You want me to go to this?
I'll do this.
Okay.
So any comments further on medical marijuana? So the flood hazard changes are required in order for us to qualify for, that our residents can qualify for flood insurance. And so they will be set no matter what, July 16th of this coming year. And the major changes are a change in the height from 8 feet to 13 feet along Plum Island and Plum Island Sound, and then from 7 feet to 10 feet around Route 1. So as this says here, the FEMA has issued new map panels for the Essex County flood insurance rate maps effective July 16th, and these new elevations from 8 to 13 feet. Those are not projections. Those are measurements of existing conditions, and so there's been a bit of a sense that, well, yes, this is taking into account the new information we might be getting about storm surge, et cetera. It does take into account old information about storm surge And it does take into account 100-year base storms, but it is not based on, well, what's going to happen over the next 100 years. Zoning bylaw revised to reflect the new map panel numbers and effective date, and the map panels must be adopted by town meeting in order, as I said, for Newbury to remain in the National Flood Insurance Program. So we have 4 maps here, and to the extent that, do you have a cursor on that? I'm wondering if it would work.
Not really, no, not
Well,
on.
maybe, could you go up and,
Yeah.
so Martha's gonna be up here, and she's gonna show, this is the Cottage Road area along the Parker River. And so the one to the left was the old maps in 2012, and you can see how close that is to the marsh demarcation. And then if you move over to the 2014 map, you can see that it's really expanded by about a couple of 100 feet. So it really has taken in a lot more property in the Cottage Road area along, coming back in from the river and then up and in. And then if you go up further in where it says Zone AE, it even goes in further towards the west.
Yeah, we should point out that we're talking about the gray and/or blue line, not the dark line.
Right, right,
It's
right,
this
right.
that's
Thank you,
expanded.
thank you, David. So that's Cottage Road.
And this, just
Whoops,
to add
whoops.
something, that is one of the areas where the base flood elevation is going from 8 feet.
8 to 13 feet.
Uh-huh.
So this goes from 8 along the Parker River. So the
Right.
next one is Little River, and this is going from 7 to 10, am I right?
This one is also going, I think, up to 13. Unfortunately, it's looking a little fuzzy here.
Yeah,
Um,
but why don't you orient people who might be looking, and so Route 1 and
so
the,
Route 1 is coming down here, the train station is up here.
The dotted line is the
or
Newburyport
Town Line.
town line.
The industrial park is up there, you can
Yeah,
see
it's up
that.
there. Scotland Road is coming down this way, Highfield Road comes up through there. So-
Yeah, but, and then the change is that if you go from that map to the other map, you can see significant increase in areas that are now hatched in black as opposed to the blue. And can you explain the difference between the black and the blue?
And the blue dotted area is the AE zone, which basically means it's not velocity flooding, and the elevation has been determined. So there's no wave action here. And that is equivalent to the 1% chance of having a 100-year storm. And the black area is what they're calling a 0.2% chance of flooding, and I'm not quite sure, I think that equates to something like a 500-year storm. So you can see between the two maps that that area has increased significantly between these two. And the AE zone has also expanded, and the base flood elevation again has gone up.
And we apologize to the public who are watching this for these maps. This is what FEMA gives us. And we just have not been able to get any better quality on this. So bear with us. And now, in these, does this have any, do you know, Martha, if any homes are affected by this in this area? We know they are in the Cottage Road area.
I think there's certainly just, some businesses
Yeah.
that are being affected, and I think potentially some of the residences along Middle Road as well. And there's certainly, even if the area hasn't expanded, they're certainly impacted by the rise in the base flood elevation.
Okay. Then the third area is the Parker River Route 1.
And so
To orient them, there's the Parker.
Here's the Parker,
And Route 1 goes right up the middle of the photograph.
right, so this whole area right in here is flooded in both scenarios. In this area, the base flood elevation has gone from 7 feet in the 2012 firm to 10 feet in the 2014 firm. And you can see that there are some when I took these, I wasn't able to get quite the same scale on both of them, but it appears that there's, you know,
Picked up some areas
picked
up.
some
And
areas.
what's that near? Is that near,
We're getting up towards,
is that Governor's? Is that
No,
Governor's?
Governor's is
Down there.
Right, no, Governors is off, so,
The Woods Hole Biological,
yeah, I think even
That's just
further
before
than
that.
that.
yeah, so.
Because you
yeah.
can see Middle Road coming down there, yes?
Yeah.
Curving down on the left-hand side, upper quadrant. It's fairly high up around the farm, I think, that's on there.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But it may be possible to tweak these a bit, I think, there.
Do the next one, Dave.
You know, this is government work, of course.
And then this is Plum Island. And so where there's been a lot of filling in, again, going from a 1% probability to a 2 with the black,
Yeah, .2.
0.2, sorry.
So the velocity zone is over here, and one interesting thing is that the velocity zone in the 2012 maps
Bigger.
was different base flood elevations, and in the new one, it's actually almost all elevation 16,
Mhm.
until you get up right to the Newburyport border where it goes to 17, and then in Newburyport it goes to 18. Before it was kind of ranging from 16 to 19. So in a sense, that is kind of slightly less drastic than it was before, but you can see that there are, you know, a lot of areas that have filled in, and here we've got the 0.2% that's now coming in along here, and the AE zone has expanded, and again, gone from base flood elevation of 8 to 13.
Okay.
So I think that summarizes the flooding issue. And Eric, do you have any questions on that? So I think that unless we have call-in.
And we should have had a
Phone
phone
number
line.
handy?
Yeah.
You know, you have cell phones, or we could have, you know, that
Yeah.
would be the next, to show that
Give 'em
we
David's
are
number.
far advanced. Email and blogs
Yeah.
and texting.
Well, I'm going to say, follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and
Get your
Instagram.
comments to us.
Please take a picture
Um,
out of your window on Plum Island.
But with that, we are finished with the presentation. Does anyone have any comments?
I have one comment here from Chief Michael Riley regarding the medical marijuana bylaw.
Mhm.
And shall I read it
Yes?
to the record, for the record? Hi, Martha. I think the planning board did an excellent job with this draft. I was going to suggest the distance of 1,000 feet from schools, and the planning board beat me to it by already having it in there. In Section 6 exemptions, I would keep the same distance rules for hardship cultivations, but we know we can't do that based on the Attorney General's rulings. If someone lives within 1,000 feet of a school or 500 feet from where kids congregate, they can find an agent to grow for them, but otherwise, it looks good to me,
Good.
so.
Well, that's nice to
Excellent.
get. Nice to get. So I think that we could close this meeting, the public hearing. What do you think?
Well, if there are no other questions, comments from
I
the
did have a
board.
question, and it may be that I misread this, because I read the amended text that you sent out yesterday, I guess. And I noticed here, you mentioned 100 feet from residential property. I don't remember reading that.
That was in a recommendation from the Attorney General. We went to 300.
Okay,
Did we change that one?
all right, so,
Yeah, we
This
increased to
is,
3.
yes,
all
yes,
right,
We're-
well, now,
yes.
I think that was in the section where this is what the Attorney General is recommending?
right, fine, then that's
The
a good point
yes,
to clear up,
that
that
was
we're
my-
not doing that.
my mistake. We had originally had 100, and we did change it to 300, so that is in the
Okay.
text, so I apologize for
I would
that.
just point out that is sort of in a sense, I don't know whether it's a logical contradiction or what it is, but basically, that means that you can't have an RMD in a residential area at all. Because you're not going to have lots that are large enough to have a separation of 300 feet if you do lot line to lot line,
Well, we have,
which may be your intent.
it is, well, it kind of is, because the only three areas that we're saying are appropriate are commercial districts.
Right.
So within those commercial districts, we're saying that we do know that there are residences that are close to those commercial districts. Along Hanover.
Right.
Along, down in, Pearson Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just saying that they ought to be 300 feet from the closest residence there.
Okay, then my follow-up question would be, could someone who is a family with children qualify for where young people normally gather and make it 500?
I'm not
No.
sure if.
No,
No.
I think they're
that
very
doesn't work.
specific on what qualifies as places where children commonly congregate, or minors
Well,
It's not
congregate.
just my house. It's, I think,
Well, so,
commonly known public and private venues. They have,
except I could see a circumstance where that could be true if you have anything from an attractive nuisance to an interesting pastime. You could regularly have kids coming to a neighborhood. What I'm getting at is, that struck me as a rather vague definition, and we might want to just look at that language to make sure that it's clear enough that we're doing one or the other. Because I think, as a parent, I might come and petition the board to say, hey, I have a 14-year-old kid, and he runs a model airplane club, and we regularly have 6 or 8 kids at our house. Does that constitute? And I think it would.
I don't think so.
yeah, I don't think it does.
doesn't.
Not in the current way. It's, that's loosely structured. I mean, if he was running,
But you see, reverse this, I'm saying the language is not specific enough. The language is open enough to make that case, in my estimation. So we need, I think, to check it.
I believe the Attorney General has indicated her intent that whatever it is, has to be organized in public, in the
Well, it
sense,
doesn't say that.
well, the regulations don't say a lot of things which the Attorney General has said they do. In a
Well,
sense.
okay.
But I
All right.
think the intent was, if you have after-school activities in regularly operated facilities, any other activities in regularly operated facilities for children, even if it's an arcade.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it extends to a house where somebody said, oh, let's have my model airplane club here. I really don't think so.
yeah. Well,
Okay.
we'll look at it.
Yeah.
We will look at it. Any other questions or concerns about any one of the issues that we've just gone over?
Heights,
Lights.
Lights? Oh, thank you.
thank you.
A voice from
Um,
the control room, so that's like a submarine. Dive.
Well, if there are no further questions on the public hearing items, then I'd ask for a motion to close it.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Second.
please. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is closed. Do we need to take any action on any of these items for like the warrants, or the warrants speak for themselves?
Well, I think the board needs to basically take a vote on final language, and there are a couple of outstanding things here that we need to, because the warrant,
I didn't get a chance to look at the warrant.
well, not even necessarily the warrant itself, but the bylaw as
Oh,
proposed, because there were some outstanding questions, and the warrant is going to be signed next Tuesday by the selectmen.
well, okay, so those are mailed out to us today, and anybody who has any comments needs to get them in then immediately, if it's gonna be out on Tuesday, right?
Yes.
I mean, like by tomorrow or,
Like, I think there are a couple of things, I mean, the way the warrant's been, article has been put together is probably not as critical as the language of the bylaw itself. And there are a couple things that were outstanding, so if I could go through those.
sure.
On the medical marijuana, there was an outstanding question about duration of special
Special
permit.
Oh, yes, right.
So I think that needs to be resolved. So I think that it seemed like we kind of concluded that it can't have an end to it.
It can only, well, how does it end? By the action of the business, and that they no longer need it?
Or their license has
Or the
been,
license is
has
pulled by
been
the state?
suspended or revoked.
But that we don't have the power to revoke it, or to require that it
Be renewed.
be renewed.
Yeah, that's what I thought, that is not really a power that lies
Right.
within our jurisdiction.
I have actually seen it in a couple of the other bylaws, but I got, if I recall our discussion with Ginny correctly, and George, I don't know if you have recollection on this, but I think the gist of it was that we couldn't impose a renewal cycle on it ourselves.
I think that's what she said. I know we had a quick meeting, and it was very good and very informative, and I think that was the result.
So the question is, are there any other permitting actions that we take, special permits, site development permits, that have a time frame of life? And I think you all said we don't.
No,
Is that correct?
our special permits are done for a task which has a lifespan, and then the special permit is complete because the operation is complete. So a special permit in this case doesn't work, in terms of the planning board anyway.
All right, so the issue may be, we're talking about the probability of having some operational aspects of the medical marijuana, about things that we've said were not under the purview of the planning board. It would fall under that in the licensing procedure.
Yeah. I think what you could do, it would seem to me, wouldn't be unreasonable, would be to have in addition to whatever happens at the state level, to have a review procedure, and simply that there was a review of, well, wait a minute, let's think. Businesses have license periods, don't they?
Right, I think it's annually that they need to be reviewed.
That's right.
Or
Yeah.
renewed.
Not by us.
No, not by
No,
us.
not by us. So,
Board.
so they would have that, be that part of that process anyway,
Right.
I think
right?
so.
Yeah. So I don't think.
So if I remember correctly, what I saw on this, you need to strike out like a sentence or so, and
Yeah, I'm thinking actually, on page 6, the very last item D on the page,
take out
take out the
first
first
sentence.
2 sentences.
Yes. The permit holder shall be required to annually provide, start there. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's actually
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, almost 4 lines you gotta get rid of.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yep, it's good.
Okay.
Okay, and in the warrant language, if you go to page 7 and then over to 8, I've,
Are we reading the bylaw or the warrant language?
The warrant.
Warrant language, okay. Yep, go ahead.
I suggested putting it in the table of use regulations after nursing home and rehabilitation center. We've got some other medically oriented things in that section.
Without having the entire thing in front of me, I should have looked at this when it came through. It seems to make sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yep.
Okay?
And I put in some footnotes. One actually was already in there. It has to do with medical, with agricultural uses. And then 4 adds it to, just adds a reference to Article 5.
That footnote 4,
Footnote 4, right.
Article 5, special permit, it's general for regulations pertaining to bed and breakfast establishments. What's that? That seems a bit,
Well, that's the language, and this is going in Article 5, which deals with special permits. And so we'd had a footnote in there just referring
oh,
people
you're
to
just
that.
adding
Adding
registered marijuana.
registered,
That's
right,
Okay,
right,
good,
right,
good,
right, okay.
good. Okay.
And then there's footnote 5, which clarifies that it excludes that one section of the commercial highway district.
Oh, good, this is the gas station.
Yeah,
Right.
Good.
yeah, this is great.
And on page 7, near the bottom, Article 9, it adds to special regulations, which is a site plan review, as amended in the article that we hope will be passed right before this, is construction, expansion, or alteration of an RMD. So that would be subject to the agricultural exemption. So even though there can't be a special permit for that, it could go through site plan review.
That's right.
Yep.
Oh, good. I don't think we- So that's new, isn't it? I've not seen that before.
We had talked about it.
We talked about it, but
Right.
that's good.
Right. Actually, I'll just go through the rest of these. Going back to page 1 under the first, in the table of contents, deleting the temporary moratorium and adding special permits, registered marijuana dispensaries.
Okay.
And then the second one is deleting the temporary moratorium. And then Article 5, inserting the marijuana, medical marijuana
I'm confused.
bylaw.
I'm not following.
If
you.
you go back to page 1,
Yeah,
under the Article PB2, you'll see something that says Table of Contents.
oh, good, okay, got it, thank you.
So this is just revising the Table of Contents to take out the moratorium and put in the new bylaw.
Everyone else followed that but me.
And then the second one, Article 10, General Regulations, that's to delete the temporary moratorium.
All right.
And then the third is to insert the proposed bylaw.
Good.
And then everything that was in red and what I had sent you previously, those were all the changes that were made before. So if everybody is okay with those changes and the one that we just made, then I think we could probably take a vote.
Let's do that, are there any that you need to do to the site plan review?
Well, let me hand these out. This one is a little bit more straightforward.
Let's just kind of go through them.
Is site plan review planning board 1, is that gonna come first?
Do you want to see this there?
That's what I was thinking, only because the medical marijuana, I guess the medical marijuana that language could be added to site plan review either way, but,
Yeah, no, it was just sort of information, and whether,
I mean, that's something else for the board to talk about, what order you'd like these things
yeah,
to
I'm
appear on
gonna
the warrant.
say, is there a procedural sort of quasi-political issue here as to which comes first, because we've got the three items, and probably this one and the FEMA maps would seem to me to be the two that we may have most potential queries about, whereas site plan review, I think we probably won't. That would be my off the top of the head sort of judgment. So does that mean we get site plan review out of the way and then move to the more difficult ones, or
I mean, actually, I thought the way we just did it
yeah,
was not bad.
okay.
The big Hunger Gila in the middle.
Right, yeah, right, yeah,
For the,
right,
you know?
right. No, I would
Yeah.
agree. I just
And then,
wanted
of
to make.
course, we don't know what we'll do for town meeting in terms of a presentation, but it's not gonna be what we just did, obviously, it'll be
Right,
Yeah, much shorter.
right,
1/5, 1/10
right.
the size.
Are the current FEMA maps on the town website?
The current ones are,
Are they as
The-
grim as they?
they're pretty tough. The only advantage is that on the website, you can actually zoom in to areas, so you can sort of pick
Right.
things out a little bit better.
Do you know what form they came in from? Are they PDFs?
I think they're PDFs, I think.
Yeah,
But we don't have the proposed ones. They're not online yet, and I don't think we have digital. I can check with Susan, but I don't think
Oh.
that they're
okay.
not online on the FEMA website, because I checked that
Ah.
today.
Oh, okay.
So we've got the paper copies,
Oh, boy.
which is what
So-
I used.
Oh, is that what?
Yeah, I took photographs of the paper
Oh.
copies.
Oh, well,
Made
in that
slides out of them.
case, why don't I have a go at them? Because I think I might be able to do something so they're, I'm not commenting.
Oh,
on
no,
what
it's
you
fine.
did,
I was
but,
just-
Yeah,
I used my tablet, that's all I had. and then
yeah. I think if I could get at them, I might be able to punch them up so that at least you can see what vaguely what they are. Because if we want to use one, or if people will, I'm sure, want to see them. Yeah, okay.
I think preparing the four that you did makes sense. I don't know if we'll show them all, but if we could do that, David, that would be great.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, let's do that. Okay,
Okay.
so anything, do you want to bring anything to our attention on the site? plan
I
review?
I don't think so. Again, this includes the changes that the board had made last time in response to Ginny's comments and Sam's comments
That's fine.
and internal comments. And the way I've worded is basically to see if the town will vote to amend that article by deleting the current site plan review in its entirety and replacing it with the new
With
one.
this, right, that's what we're doing, right? Deleting it entirely and replacing with a. So we still have, that the site plan approval shall lapse within 2 years. Unless any construction work contaminated thereby shall have commenced and proceeded. This is our major bone of contention in this, so I think we're okay. 2-year period shall not include time required to pursue or await determination of an appeal, okay. Okay, this looks good. Any comments from anyone?
I agree, it does look good.
It reads
more can
well.
I say?
It reads well, too.
Right.
Linda, anything?
Nope.
David?
No.
Okay, so then this is what?
The flood
Flood
hazard,
hazard.
which you all have seen before. So basically, the article language is just,
You're welcome,
No.
sir.
to see if the town will vote to adopt the new map panels, numbers blah, 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 dated July 16th, 2014, and amend certain provisions of the Town of Newbury zoning bylaws, Articles 2 and 4 as follows, and then the change to add the new date,
Mm-hmm.
and then complete,
New numbers,
and the new numbers.
okay.
So there's nothing new on that one.
Well, actually, I'm just curious, we used numbers there, but they don't really use the numbers on what we're approving, they just, am I right? They just approve the maps. Do you know what I mean? A written section that says it's going from 8 to 13 feet, or they just show you the map?
They just show you the map.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, the map is,
And you assume that it's 8 to 13 in most cases, but, you know, there's no way of knowing.
there's no way of knowing unless you actually take a look at it. And
No, go out there with a surveyor.
well, right.
Am I right, David?
Yeah,
There's no way of knowing.
that, you know, there's still an inexact science, let's put it that way.
And if you feel that it's incorrect, you can,
Yeah.
have a letter of map
You have
amendment.
a letter
or
of map amendment, you send it to FEMA, and they'll fight you on it, I guess. Anyway, we don't hear a lot in this town, but we'd heard some rumors of people in Rowley being very upset, but
Right.
haven't heard much more on that. Okay, so then we would need a motion to accept and forward to the, is that what, accept and forward to the Board of Selectmen for town meeting? the
Yeah.
Warrants for,
Approve. And I think I might do them separately only because the medical marijuana one is amended. So, approve that as amended and forward the language to the selectmen. The other two were
or
as
straightforward.
are
okay.
straightforward.
I need a,
I
And
move
I'll-
that
I'll move.
we approve the marijuana, whatever it's
Warrant.
called these days.
bylaw,
Bylaw, okay. It really isn't,
Forwarded.
is it?
right?
Yeah, be forwarded to the selectmen as amended at this meeting.
Second,
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Then I need a motion for both the firm maps and for, do you want to do these separately as well?
Might as well.
Yeah,
I have a motion for the site plan review.
I move that we forward the new site plan review bylaw as reviewed by us tonight to the selectmen.
Second,
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes unanimously.
And finally, I
And-
move that we forward to the selectmen the new FEMA map
Second,
asset overlay district.
second,
Second?
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. So,
Okay.
we have closed the public hearing, we have voted on these issues. We've gone through our agenda, I think.
Not all of it.
No,
What else is left?
not quite.
We've got some status reports, and also before we move on to those, I'd like to just mention one thing. I've been working with Colleen Bailey at DCR, the flood map coordinator person there, to try to get a FEMA outreach meeting up here in this area. And FEMA suggested a number of dates. It looks like April 29th is the date, which is next week. Unfortunately, we do not have a location yet. They were hoping for the fire hall, which is booked that night.
Or in the evening?
Yeah, it would be, I think, from 5 to 8 in the evening, I believe, kind of an open house where people can look at the maps, and there'll be a couple of
What
informational
about
sessions.
Well, either Peter Hall at one end or the library community room at the other.
Yeah, I don't know how late they're open.
Well, they are open till 7, but the point is that any town official can,
We can use it beyond
Yeah,
that,
we can use it.
yeah.
yeah.
So, But both of those, I thought about the library. The ones that they've held at the Newburyport Auditorium have been more people than the library could probably hold. Hard to say how many people are going to come. Peter Hall might be a good,
Well,
but I'll check
actually, I
out
think
both
Peter
the-
Hall is no bigger than the library room.
You don't think so?
No, don't think so.
Okay.
Um,
Anyway, I'll check out both of those.
No, they're not. It's about the same size.
Yeah, I would think. So this is April the 29th,
29th.
which is what day of the week?
It's no, I'm sorry, it's a Thursday, I think.
Was
No,
it-
May 1st is a Thursday. It's a Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right, it is a Tuesday. Yep.
That's what I was trying to think. Tuesday.
But there's no selectmen's meeting that night, 'cause it'll be the fifth Tuesday of the month.
And so they were thinking from when to when?
I thought she said from 5 to 8, but I'll verify that.
Farmers' hours, yes, okay. Now, does she have, I think, interesting question to ask her. We can provide projection if she can provide files as well as maps. That's good too, but it's much, I mean, it works better. I went to a planning meeting in Newburyport, which I'll tell you about later, and it just works better that if you have the ability to really show something big and a group of people can look at it.
It does make sense. I know they haven't really done it that way in the past. They've put them out on tables, and people can kind of find the one for their area. And the FEMA guys talk about insurance and various things, but
I'm
I'll
thinking
suggest that to her.
To talk the group through a map.
Yeah,
So
yep,
people
so they
understand
understand.
how
Yep, I
to
think-
function in
yep.
relation to the map. You
Yep.
need,
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
Are you in it?
Are you?
Not that I know of.
No, no. Couple hundred feet. So Peter
Right.
Hall might make more sense. I don't know.
Well, I'll check out both and see.
Okay.
Right.
101 Newburyport Turnpike.
Doug and I went out and had a meeting with Angelo, and then subsequent to that, John and Doug and I went back out, and I don't know how many of you have been by the site recently, but he is making a lot of progress.
Yes.
Yeah, I was by there yesterday. and
Different world.
I was
Mhm.
amazed, like, wow.
So he's got,
Different.
foundation in,
Yeah.
he's kind of taken it all down. It's a lot cleaned up.
Yeah, it looks a
there
lot
was-
nicer.
Yeah, still some issues with the silt fence in a couple of locations, and there's still some stuff in the back of the site, but he has promised that he will keep his vehicles off of Sled Road. And so it seems like finally we're getting some progress here.
Yeah, it does.
And he talked again about, landscaping on the, Route 1 side and all of that kind of
Good.
stuff. So his intention really is
Good.
to make this a nice-looking site.
Yeah, it has an interest. I mean, he's in business and it should look good. So, I mean, it took us a while and obviously whatever issues were going on, but I'm very happy that it's starting to make some progress. So, Playmakers.
We had a pre-application conference out there with, TW Excavating is actually doing the site work, and Peter Spatafore is doing the renovations, and so we met out there with both of them, and John, Doug, Kathleen, and I were all there, and Chrissy met up with us, and we just walked around and looked at various issues, actually both with the building and on the site. They really had no questions for us at this point, but they had put down erosion control, which Doug looked at and was satisfied with. And, just encourage them if there are questions as the site work goes on, any issues, just to keep us informed. So, the building has some issues,
Yes, it just does.
yeah.
Did you walk through it?
We walked into the basement area, which is accessible from outside,
In the back,
in the back,
Yeah.
and, you know, it was built on ledge, basically.
right.
And the whole wall is kicking kind of in and out, and
I mean, I just pray that she doesn't run into too many problems because, anyway, hopefully it works.
And the schedule has had to be accelerated. Originally, I think they were aiming for the beginning of September, but she's been told by her landlord in Rowley that she needs to be in, or out of that place, I think in July. At the end of July, so
Yeah.
their target date. And it's gonna be an issue for her because she's got summer programs all lined up, and now it's gonna
Yeah,
cut
see
into
what happens.
those. So,
Anything further on TW on the other side of the street? You've
I have heard,
rumors, right?
I had the phone call regarding a potential A&R, have not seen that. I haven't heard anything else about it. We heard a rumor that they're actually not interested in the site anymore, so I'm not sure what's happening.
So we'll see what happens, okay. Caldwell Farm, we heard back from the HOA. They'd like to schedule a meeting, and so Martha has put a call out to Dan and Doug. And we're waiting to get a date for them,
Yeah, they said that any of those dates are fine.
and, okay.
The ones that worked for me worked for them as well.
So the only one was the 21st, am I right?
So when are these dates, please?
They were the 1st and 2nd of May, the 5th through the 9th of May, and the last week, actually a few next week, and then the last couple in the last week of April.
Well, get me something. The group from Caldwell is Cliff Irons, who's a fellow we met, and two others. And Cliff has been my contact, just the last 2 days. But, so we'll do it sometime, and it looks like late April or early May. Hopefully late April.
So is he on their board, or?
This Cliff Irons was the fellow, there were 5 folks that we met with, when
Yeah.
we met with Jerry. Cliff Irons was one of them, and there was another fellow who was part of that group, and Cliff Irons has been put in charge of this for Caldwell Farms.
Uh-huh.
So, I think that's a good sign to move forward. So, we're gonna meet them and see if we can walk.
I would advise you to let Carla know.
Carla knows.
She knows,
She knows.
yes.
She knows because she got a copy of some kind of a memo that was HOA
Mm-hmm.
driven, and so she's aware of what's going on. Yes, she's aware of
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
Oh, only that, you know, what will, if she's not, once she finds out, she'll be there anyways.
Right.
Yep, no, they've been, the homeowners association, the board sent out an email to all the residents telling them that this is going on, and saying that they're invited to come on the walk as well, so.
Mhm.
Even though it looked like they would just wanted to do 3 people from the HOA, but so who knows? Well, can't have a cast of thousands.
No.
So that's, the great term of the 21st century is cautiously optimistic. All right, Marsh Meadows.
I think the conservation restriction needed to be signed at a higher level, and I think they're waiting to get that back before it can be recorded, so I haven't actually,
What does that mean, higher
the
level?
the state, I
Oh,
think.
okay. Okay. Okay, does anyone else have any other issues they'd like to bring forward?
Well, I will give you a report on the Conservation Commission last night.
How are you doing that?
because I was there. Particularly in relation to the Picor solar farming application. What had, I don't know whether you know, but what had happened there was that a group of 10+ citizens had requested that an RDA, which is essentially a determination of applicability, be considered by the Conservation Commission. And so they came and made a presentation of the Conservation Commission about the project in relation to the site and the issues that they see with the new plans. And after a fair amount of discussion and a couple of comments from people who were at the meeting, the board, or in their case the commission, voted to in fact require a notice of intent, which is, in other words, to say essentially that it should be looked at, which changes the ball game. They also submitted.
Just occurred to me for the audience and for others.
Yeah.
Describe exactly where this is and what the original plan was and why.
Okay,
why
so this is the Picor property on Scotland Road, which is on the north side of the road, and is about, 70+ acres of land, which has been hayfields for a number of years. And there was a proposal some time ago to essentially build a solar farm of multiple panels there. That came before the selectmen and was turned down by the selectmen. There was some talk, and I don't know whether it actually happened, that the applicant would then appeal that decision. But what happened recently is it became clear that they were actually coming back with a proposal to, well, that's the part of the problem. A proposal to erect some 70+ greenhouses, quote unquote, on top of which would be solar panels. And these would be in a slightly different area from the original proposal. They would be in rows accessed off the road that leads in. And there are a number of issues here, one of which is because all of this area is what is known as bordering vegetated wetlands. There is an issue which has to do with water supply, because part of the area feeds the Artichoke Reservoir, which is water supply for Newburyport. There is also a considerable amount of discussion as to what can happen within such an area. And in addition, there is the whole determination as to whether this is in fact a legitimate agricultural operation, and therefore whether it's exempt in the ways we were discussing about the marijuana cultivation.
Right.
And they have done a number of things, include they being the applicant for the RDA, and they obtained a letter from the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, a copy of which I have, and so does Marlene, which very thoroughly goes through what is known of the current application for the greenhouse solar array setup, and determines essentially that in the belief of the association, the Conservation Commission Association, it probably doesn't qualify as an agricultural activity, essentially because for it to qualify, you would have to have more than 50% of the generation of monies, etc. So there are a whole slew of questions
But
that,
so where
you
we
know.
are then, that's great
Yeah.
background, is that now a group of 10 citizens has appeared before the Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission is saying, we think you need to do an RDA.
No, NOI, a notice of intent. They've done the
They did.
determination. They did, yeah, in other words, they knew the site. They had seen the plans that are currently extant for the second proposal. And so they were simply listening to a very well put together rehearsal of all the issues which bring it into their purview. And so they decided that indeed they should request a notice of intent, which means it's a public hearing situation. Interestingly, the proponents were not present last night, which I thought was, an interesting comment anyway on perhaps how they're doing things.
So what's the next step?
Well, the next step is that the Conservation Commission will inform Sage Stone, right? Sage
Yeah, I
Stone,
think
who are
so,
the
yeah.
LLC, who are the potential applicant, that they have to file a notice of intent. And if they don't file a notice of intent, then there are number of things that follow from
Oh,
that.
that's interesting.
And I think, and this is only my sense and partly opinion too, is that if this goes in the direction that I believe it will, in terms of examining what their proposal is, and examining and requesting all the information we don't currently have, it probably will end up on our table, because it will in fact be a site plan review
That's
situation
exactly what I was thinking
if
about.
it's not agricultural.
Right.
Right.
And so, we should be aware of that.
Okay, well,
Um,
that's very interesting.
yeah.
Anything else happened last night?
No, not last night, but last week, I took the opportunity to go to the public master plan session in Newburyport.
How'd that go?
Well, it was interesting. They are in the middle of a fully fledged review of their master plan. They have a committee going. They have a number of subcommittees, and they are going through it section by section. And the section they were talking about that night was land use. And they did it on a fairly sort of basic charrette kind of principle, in that they had a brief introduction by the young woman who is honchoing the thing for the planning department.
Is she an
They-
employee or is she a consultant?
She's an employee. She's just sort of putting the process together. And they subdivided a group of about 30-plus people, I would think, into about 5 tables, provided them with a map of Newburyport, and also, rather interestingly, the map was to draw on, to write on, and aerial photograph, which corresponded to the map, so that you could actually identify, what you were looking at in terms of what was actually there. And stickies, and they asked people essentially to, as a group, look at what they thought their priorities were in relation to the future and land use. What I found very interesting was that the mayor was there, and the mayor was leading one of those tables and was the reporter back to the group. And so, they have participation at the highest level. There were also other people from the planning department, but they were pretty low-key in terms of who they were. The other thing I would say is that I did talk to one of my fellow commissioners from MVPC who was there, and he told me that they initially this was all happening in, the large meeting room in town, City Hall in Newburyport. Apparently, the first couple of public meetings they've had, and this is, I think, at least the third, maybe the fourth, and they're having one next month, and they're on Wednesday nights, off cycle from their planning board, which enabled me to go because their planning board meets the same time ours does. They had 100 people turn out the first time, and close to that the second time. And he said, Ed said that it was rather noticeable to him that last week that number had slimmed down, but he felt it was because people who had come with a particular goal in mind, a particular issue in mind, had an opportunity in those first couple of public meetings to be heard, to meet with people, to find out what the process was. And so it was the more diehard and also, broadly concerned people. One of the interesting things was that there were clearly a number of people there from COW, which is the Citizens for Open Waterfront, and they couldn't get their heads beyond the waterfront.
Well, that's what
You
the thing is.
know, but it's funny because they were residents. There was, I don't think any of that group. There are people, of course, here in Newbury who feel strongly about that in both directions, but most of them were actually residents of Newburyport, and so someone in that group who clearly was not a COW member sort of said, there are other issues, but it didn't go anywhere because I toured some of the groups. But I thought it was
I'm glad you
interesting.
went. I in fact was thinking of it myself, and something came up and I was unable to do it. And I kept on looking for reports in the paper, but I didn't see anything. So I guess the question I have is, what are there things that they are discussing that have relevance for us?
Yes, I think so. Because, okay, I haven't followed this up yet, but I think it's Kate, the young lady who's putting this whole thing sort of together in terms of process. They apparently have gotten a feedback process which is working through their website, and basically are pulling together stuff that both comes in from people and also stuff that comes out of these meetings into something that you can access on the website. I will find out sort of what that looks like. Why I mentioned that is because there were five groups in all. And it was interesting that some groups did sort of, as I say, get stuck a bit on one thing. However, at least 3 of the groups, to my certain knowledge, in terms of the feedback they gave, in a standard charrette format, talked about the traffic circle. And
Route 1.
yes, well, there's only one.
No,
There
they
isn't-
got the new one down near the
Well, there
bridge.
isn't that, no, that's a roundabout. Anyway, talked about that and the train station and, sort of what has happened, what is happening, and what may happen. And interestingly, there are pretty mixed reactions to the whole proposal for the total rental housing development down there, which, again, I haven't seen particularly reported in the newspaper, but clearly there is a constituency who feels that it will, well, everything, from bring people to Newburyport who we're not used to seeing,
Well, it's a
et
mixed
cetera.
unit project. It's
Yeah.
not a low-income project, as
Right.
far as I know. They
Yeah.
have a component that's low, they have a component that's mod, and they have a
Right.
component that's market rate. That's
Yeah.
the way it
Right.
was presented to me. It may have shifted, but same problem with Little River.
Well, exactly. But, what I'm thinking simply is there are a number of issues which they're looking at. And the fascinating thing is, and I think, this is something that Linda's probably much more aware of than any of us, and that is there's so little land in Newburyport for development. And it's been so contentious over time. The Woodman Farm down on Low Street, came up heavily in one group. People saying, the whole business of shall we preserve it or shall we develop it, because we maybe could focus all the development we want to do on there, as opposed to whatever. Interestingly, what they did too is now the state has, and I'm aware of this through the commission, the state has these two categories of, oh Jesus, I'm going to forget now, but two basic sort of categories that you put things into, and they're either an area for what they're calling preservation. They're either PPAs or PPs. Can you help me here? Preservation areas or
Growth
Right,
areas.
well, it's priority preservation areas, I
Yeah.
think, and then the priority development.
PDs, priority development. Yeah, because unfortunately, the Merrimack Valley Commission did something that the state picked up as a model and changed it and went and changed one of the names. And so, it's alphabet soup. But it was a rather neat idea for this charrette. I didn't like it when the state used it, but at the other thing I went to. But you were basically saying, okay, is this an area essentially where we want, for whatever reason, to essentially preserve it? And I would say conserve is a much better word for what the people are talking about. So it could be anything from a structure, an area, a neighborhood, to a park, to open space. Or do we want to look at this as a place where we think essentially there should be either development, redevelopment, or whatever?
Mhm.
And that seemed to work with non-professionals, may I, if I can put it that way. In other words, people who are interested in these kinds of things but don't have any particular background in development or planning or whatever. That seemed a kind of handy way, and people were very easily moving through this and saying, well, this is a PD and that's a PA and whatever. So I would think that
Anything at all about Plum Island?
Okay. I think most people sort of skirted it, but the group I happened to be in, which was honchoed by their planner, whose name eludes me for the moment.
Andy Port?
Andy Port, right. There was, I think, general
Did they
agreement.
accept you as an interloper?
Oh, I'm not.
He's a property
Oh,
owner.
that's right, he's a property owner.
Yes,
It's legal.
Oh.
so there,
Yeah.
soon to be a full-fledged citizen.
Oh,
Right,
my
yes.
God.
So anyway, but no, I did declare myself, and there was this sort of slightly blinking silence. And then I further added that I was on the planning board in Newbury, and they all went, oh, really? Like that was some strange group, a cabal. Okay, that particular group anyway ranged from limited development through a moratorium to no development. What I think is that right now it seems to be an issue beyond most people's ability to kind of they don't feel comfortable making a particular comment about it. And the people who did were obviously myself, and a couple of other people, one who lives on the island. And I did hear a couple of people say in other groups that they felt that the whole water and sewer issue had been a fundamental mistake, which I found, obviously it reflects my own opinion, but at the same time, it's one that wasn't popular for a long time, but now I think. And the other question that came up was, well, should we learn the lesson that we now have infrastructure which is under stress and threat? Should we do those kinds of things? And this related to the Woodman property down on Low Street, which has a whole bunch of wetland issues and so on.
All right, it's 9
Yeah.
o'clock. Great, very, very interesting stuff. Anyone else have anything else to bring forward?
That's good, David.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hasta la vista, baby.